Chapter 8, Part 2 of Fanny Herself. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Fanny Herself by Edna Ferber. Chapter 8, Part 2. Two conversations that took place before she left are perhaps worth recording. One was with Father Fitzpatrick of St. Ignatius Catholic Church. The other with Rabbi Emil Fowman of Temple Emmanuel. An impulse brought her to Father Fitzpatrick's study. It was a week before her departure. She was tired. There had been much last signing of papers, nailing of boxes, strapping of trunks. When things began to come too thick and fast for her, she put on her hat and went for a walk at the close of the May day. May in Wisconsin is a thing all fragrant and gold and blue and white with cherry blossoms and pink with apple blossoms and tremulous with budding things. Fanny struck out westward through the neat streets of the little town, and found herself on the bridge over the ravine in which she had played when a little girl, the ravine that her childish imagination had peopled with such pageantry of redskin and priests and voyageurs and cavaliers. She leaned over the iron railing and looked down. Where grass and brook and wildflower had been, there now oozed great eruptions of ash heaps, tin cans, broken bottles, mounds of dirt. Winnebago's growing pains had begun. Fanny turned away with a little sick feeling. She went on across the bridge past the Catholic church. Just next to the church was the parish house where Father Fitzpatrick lived. It always looked as if it had been scrubbed inside and out with a scouring brick. Its windows were a reproach and a challenge to every housekeeper in Winnebago. Fanny wanted to talk to somebody about that ravine. She was full of it. Father Fitzpatrick's study overlooked it. Besides, she wanted to see him before she left Winnebago. A picture came to her mind of his handsome, ruddy face, twinkling with humor, as she had last seen it when he had dropped in at Brandeis's Bazaar for a chat with her mother. She turned in at the gate and ran up the immaculate gray-painted steps that always gleamed as though still wet with the paintbrush. "I shouldn't wonder if that housekeeper of his comes out with a pail of paint and does them every morning before breakfast," Fanny said to herself as she rang the bell. Usually it was that sparse and speckled person herself who opened the parish house door, but today Fanny's ring was answered by Father Casey, parish assistant. A sour-nosed and suspicious young man, Father Casey, thick-speckled and pointed of nose. Nothing of the jolly priest about him. He was new to the town, but he recognized Fanny and surveyed her darkly. "Father Fitzpatrick in? I'm Fanny Brandeis." "The Reverend Father is busy," and the glass door began to close. "Who is it?" boomed a voice from within. "Who are you turning away, Casey?" "A woman, not a parishioner." The door was almost shut now. Footsteps down the hall. "Good! Let her in." The door opened ever so reluctantly. Father Fitzpatrick loomed up beside his puny assistant, dwarfing him. He looked sharply at the figure on the porch. "For the love of Casey, you're a fool! How you ever got beyond being an altar boy is more than I can see. Come in, child, come in. The man's cut out for a jailer, not a priest." Fanny's two hands were caught in one of his big ones, and she was led down the hall to the study. It was the room of a scholar and a man, and the one spot in the house that defied the housekeeper's weapons of broom and duster. A comfortable and disreputable room, full of books and fishing tackle, and chairs with sagging springs, and a sofa that was dented with friendly hollows. Pipes on the disorderly desk. A copy of Mr. Dooley, spread face down on what appeared to be next Sunday's sermon, rough drafted. "I just wanted to talk to you." Fanny drifted to the shelves, book lover that she was, and ran a finger over half a dozen titles. "Your assistant was justified, really, in closing the door on me, but I'm glad you rescued me." She came over to him and stood looking up at him. He seemed to loom up endlessly, though hers was a medium height. "I think I really wanted to talk to you about that ravine, though I came to say good-bye." "Sit down, child, sit down." He creaked into his great leather-upholstered desk chair himself. "If you had left without seeing me, I'd have excommunicated Casey. Between you and me, the man's mad. His job ought to be duenna to a Spanish maiden, not assistant to a priest with a leaning toward the flesh." Now Father Fitzpatrick talked with no, you couldn't call it a brogue. It was nothing so gross as that. One does not speak of the flavor of a rare wine. One calls attention to its bouquet. A subtle, teasing, elusive something that just tickles the senses instead of punching them in the ribs. So his speech was permeated with a will-o'-the-wisp, a tingling richness that evaded definition. You will have to imagine it. There shall be no vain attempt to set it down. Besides, you always skip dialect. So you're going away, I'd heard. Where to? Chicago, Haynes Cooper. It's a wonderful chance. I don't see yet how I got it. There's only one other woman on their business staff. I mean actually working in an executive way, in the buying and selling end of the business. Of course, there are thousands doing clerical work and that kind of thing. Have you ever been through the plant? It's incredible. Father Fitzpatrick drummed his fingers on the arm of his chair, and looked at Fanny, his handsome eyes half shut. So it's going to be business, hmm? Well, I suppose it's only natural. Your mother and I used to talk about you often. I don't know if you and she ever spoke seriously of this little trick of drawing, or cartooning, or whatever it is you have. She used to think about it. She said once to me that it looked to her more than just a knack, an authentic gift of caricature, she called it, if it only could be developed. But of course Theodore took everything. That worried her. Oh, nonsense, that! I just amuse myself with it. Yes, but what amuses you might amuse other people. There's all too few amusing things in the world. Your mother was a smart woman, Fanny, the smartest I ever knew. There's no money in it, even if I were to get on with it. What could I do with it? Who ever heard of a woman cartoonist? And I couldn't illustrate. Those pink cheesecloth pictures the magazines use. I want to earn money, lots of it, and now. She got up and went to the window, and stood there looking down the steep green slope of the ravine that lay, a natural amphitheater, just below. Money, mused Father Fitzpatrick. Well, it's popular and handy, and you look to me like the kind of girl who'd get it, once you started out for it. I've never had much myself. They say it has a way of turning to dust and ashes in the mouth, once you get a good satisfying bite of it. But that's only talk, I suppose. Fanny laughed a little, still looking at the ravine. I'm fairly accustomed to dust and ashes by this time. It won't be a new taste to me. She whirled around suddenly. And speaking of dust and ashes, isn't this a shame? A crime? Why doesn't somebody stop it? Why don't you stop it? She pointed to the desecrated ravine below. Her eyes were blazing, her face all animation. Father Fitzpatrick came over and stood beside her. His face was sad. He stopped abruptly and looked down into her glowing face. He cleared his throat. It's a perfectly natural state of affairs, he said smoothly. Winnebago's growing, especially over there on the west side since the new mill went up, and they've extended the streetcar line. They need the land to build on. It's business and money. Business! It's a crime! It's wanton! Those ravines are the most beautiful natural spots in Wisconsin. Why, they're history and romance and beauty. So that's the way you feel about it? Of course, don't you? Can't you stop it? Petitions? Certainly, I feel it's an outrage, but I'm just a poor fool of a priest, and sentimental, with no head for business. Now, you're a businesswoman, and different. You're joking. Say, listen, my girl, the world's made up of just two things, ravines and dump heaps. And the dumpers are forever edging up and squeeging up, and trying to grab the ravines and spoil them when nobody's looking. You've made your choice, and allied yourself with the dump heaps. What right have you to cry out against the desecration of the ravines? The right that everyone has that loves them. Child, you're going to get so used to seeing your ravines choked up at Haynes Cooper that after a while you'll prefer 'em that way. Fanny turned on him passionately. I won't, and if I do, perhaps it's just as well. There's such a thing as too much ravine. What do you want me to do? Stay here and grub away, and become a crabbed old maid like Irma Klein, thankful to be taken around by the married crowd, joining the Aid Society, and going to the card parties on Sunday nights? Or I could marry a traveling man, perhaps, or Lee Cohn of the Golden Eagle. I'm just like any other ambitious woman with brains. No, you're not. You're different, and I'll tell you why. You're a Jew. Yes, I've got that handicap. That isn't a handicap, Fanny. It's an asset. Outwardly, you're like any other girl of your age. Inwardly, you've been molded by occupation, training, religion, history, temperament, race, into something. Ethnologists have proved that there's no such thing as a Jewish race, she interrupted pertly. Maybe. I don't know what you'd call it then. You can't take a people and persecute them for thousands of years, hounding them from place to place, herding them in dark and filthy streets, without leaving some sort of brand on them, a mark that differentiates. Sometimes it doesn't show outwardly, but it's there inside. You know, Fanny, how it's always been said that no artist can become a genius until he has suffered? You've suffered, you Jews, for centuries and centuries. until you're all artists. Quick to see drama because you've lived in it, emotional, oversensitive, cringing or swaggering, high-strung, demonstrative, affectionate, generous. Maybe they're right. Perhaps it isn't a race. But what do you call the thing, then, that made you draw me as you did that morning when you came to 10 o'clock Mass and did a caricature of me in the pulpit? You showed up something that I've been trying to hide for 20 years, till I'd fooled everybody, including myself. My church is always packed. Nobody else there ever saw it. I'll tell you, Fanny, what I've always said. The Irish would be the greatest people in the world, if it weren't for the Jews. They laughed together at that, and the tension was relieved. Well, anyway, said Fanny, and patted his great arm, I'd rather talk to you than to any man in the world. I hope you won't be able to say that a year from now, dear girl. And so they parted. He took her to the door himself, and watched her slim figure down the street and across the ravine bridge, and thought she walked very much like her mother, shoulders squared, chin high, hips firm. He went back into the house, after surveying the sunset largely, and encountered the dour Casey in the hall. I'll type your sermon now, sir, if it's done. It isn't done, Casey, and you know it. Oh, Casey! I wish your imagination would supply that brogue, because it was such a deliciously soft and racy thing. Oh, Casey, Casey, you're a better priest than I am, but a poorer man. Fanny was to leave Winnebago the following Saturday. She had sold the last of the household furniture, and had taken a room at the Haley House. She felt very old and experienced, and sad. That, she told herself, was only natural. Leaving things to which one is accustomed is always hard. Queerly enough, it was her good-bye to Aloysius that most unnerved her. Aloysius had been taken on at Gerritson's, and the dignity of his new position sat heavily upon him. You should have seen his ties. Fanny sought him out at Gerritson's. It's floor manager of the basement I am, he said, and struck an elegant attitude against the case of Mrs. Ready-to-wear coats. And when you come back to Winnebago, Miss Fanny, and the saints send it be soon, I'll bet you'll see me on the first floor, keeping a stern but kindly eye on the swellest trade in town. Every last thing I know I learned off your poor ma. I hope it will serve you here, Aloysius. Serve me! He bent closer. Meanin' no offense, Miss Fanny, but say, listen, once that you get a Yiddish business education into an Irish head, and there's no limit to the length he can go. If I ain't a dry goods king by the time I'm 30, I hope a packing case'll fall on me. The sight of Aloysius seemed to recall, so vividly, all that was happy and all that was hateful about Brandeis's Bazaar, all the bravery and pluck and resourcefulness of the bright-eyed woman he had admiringly called his boss, that Fanny found her self-control slipping. She put out her hand rather blindly to meet his great red paw, a dressy striped cuff seemed to make it all the redder, murmured a word of thanks in return for his fervent good wishes, and fled up the basement stairs. On Friday night, she was to leave next day, she went to the temple. The evening service began at 7. At 6:30 Fanny had finished her early supper. She would drop in at Dr. Thalmann's house and walk with him to temple, if he had not already gone. Nein, Herr Rabbi ist noch hier, sure, the maid said in answer to Fanny's question. The Thalmanns had a German maid, one Minna, who bullied the invalid Mrs. Thalmann, was famous for her cookies with walnuts on top, and who made life exceedingly difficult for unlinguistic callers. Rabbi Thalmann was up in his study. Fanny ran lightly up the stairs. "Who is it, Emil? That Minna. Next Monday her week is up. She goes." "It is I, Mrs. Thalmann, Fanny Brandeis." "Na, Fanny, now what do you think?" In the brightly lighted doorway of his little study appeared Rabbi Thalmann, on one foot a comfortable old Romeo, on the other a street shoe. He held out both hands. "Only at supper we talked about you. Isn't that so, Harriet?" he called into the darkened room. "I came to say good-bye, and I thought we might walk to temple together. How's Mrs. Thalmann tonight?" The little rabbi shook his head darkly, and waved a dismal hand. But that was for Fanny alone. What he said was, "She's really splendid today, a little tired perhaps, but what is that?" "Emil," from the darkened bedroom, "how can you say that? But how? What I have suffered today only, torture, and because I say nothing I am not sick." "Go in," said Rabbi Thalmann. So Fanny went in to the woman lying yellow-faced on the pillows of the dim old-fashioned bedroom with its walnut furniture and its red plush mantel-drape. Mrs. Thalmann held out a hand. Fanny took it in hers and perched herself on the edge of the bed. She patted the dry, devitalized hand, and pressed it in her own strong electric grip. Mrs. Thalmann raised her head from the pillow. "Tell me, did she have her white apron on?" "White apron?" "Mina, the girl." "Oh." Fanny's mind jerked back to the gingham-covered figure that had opened the door for her. "Yes," she lied, "a white one, with crochet around the bottom. Quite grand." Mrs. Thalmann sank back on the pillow with a satisfied sigh. "I wonder." She shook her head. "What that girl face alone when I am helpless here." Rabbi Thalmann came into the room, both feet booted now, and placed his slippers neatly, toes out, under the bed. "Ach, Harriet, the girl is all right. You imagine. Come, Fanny." He took a great fat watch out of his pocket. "It is time to go." Mrs. Thalmann laid a detaining hand on Fanny's arm. "You will come back often here to Winnebago?" "I'm afraid not. Once a year, perhaps, to visit my graves." The sick eyes regarded the fresh young face. "Your mother, Fanny, we didn't understand her so well here in Winnebago among us Jewish ladies. She was different." Fanny's face hardened. She stood up. Yes, she was different. "She comes often into my mind now, when I am here alone, with only the four walls. We were ever doomed, we women. But how doomed! She was too smart for us, your mother. Too smart. Und eine sehr brave Frau." And suddenly Fanny, she who had resolved to set her face against all emotion and all sentiment, found herself with her glowing cheek pressed against the withered one, and it was the weak old hand that patted her now. So she lay for a moment silent. Then she got up, straightened her hat, smiled. "Auf Wiedersehen," she said in her best German, "und gute Besserung." But the rabbi's wife shook her head. "Good-bye." From the hall below Dr. Thalmann called to her. "Come, child, come." Then, "Ach, the light in my study, I forgot to turn it out. Fanny, be so good, yes?" Fanny entered the bright little room, reached up to turn off the light, and paused a moment to glance about her. It was an ugly, comfortable, old-fashioned room that had never progressed beyond the what-not period. Fanny's eye was caught by certain framed pictures on the walls. They were photographs of Rabbi Thalmann's confirmation classes. Spindling-legged little boys in the splendor of patent-leather buttoned shoes, stiff white shirts, black broadcloth suits with satin lapels, self-conscious and awkward little girls, those in the minority, in white dresses and stiff white hair bows. In the center of each group sat the little rabbi, very proud and alert. Fanny was not among these. She had never formally taken the vows of her creed. As she turned down the light now and found her way down the stairs, she told herself that she was glad this was so. It was a matter of only 4 blocks to the temple, but they were late, and so they hurried, and there was little conversation. Fanny's arm was tucked comfortably in his. It felt somehow startlingly thin, that arm. And as they hurried along there was a jerky feebleness about his gait. It was with difficulty that Fanny restrained herself from supporting him when they came to a rough bit of walk or a sudden step. Something fine in her prompted her not to, but the alert mind in that old frame sensed what was going on in her thoughts. "He's getting feeble, the old rabbi, hm?" "Not a bit of it. I've got all I can do to keep up with you. You set such a pace." "I know, I know. They are not all so kind, Fanny. They are too prosperous, this congregation of mine, and some day off with his head. And in my place there will step a young man with eyeglasses instead of spectacles. They are tired of hearing about the prophets. Texts from the Bible have gone out of fashion. You think I do not see them giggling, The young people? And whispering in the choir loft, and the buzz when I get up from my chair after the second hymn. Is he going to have a sermon? Is he? Sure enough. Nah, he will let them sit up, my successor. Sex sermons, political lectures. That's it, lectures. They were turning in at the temple now. The race is to the young, Fanny, to the young, and I am old. She squeezed the frail old arm in hers. "My dear," she said, "my dear." A second breaking of her new resolutions. One by one, 2 by 2, they straggled in for the Friday evening service, these placid, prosperous people, not unkind, but careless, perhaps, in their prosperity. "He's worth any 10 of them," Fanny said hotly to herself, as she sat in her pew that, after tomorrow, would no longer be hers. "The dear old thing. Sex sermons. And the race is to the young. How right he is. Well, no one can say I'm not getting an early start." The choir had begun the first hymn when there came down the aisle a stranger. There was a little stir among the congregation. Visitors were rare. He was dark and very slim, with the slimness of steel wire. He passed down the aisle rather uncertainly. A traveling man, Fanny thought, dropped in, as sometimes they did, to say Kaddish for a departed father or mother. Then she changed her mind. Her quick eye noted his walk, a peculiar walk, with a spring in it. Only one unfamiliar with cement pavements could walk like that. The Indians must have had that same light, muscular step. He chose an empty pew halfway down the aisle, and stumbled into it rather awkwardly. Fanny thought he was unnecessarily ugly, even for a man. Then he looked up, and nodded and smiled at Lee Kohn across the aisle. His teeth were very white, and the smile was singularly sweet. Fanny changed her mind again. Not so bad looking, after all. Different, anyway. And then, why, of course! Little Clarence Hale, come back from the West. Clarence Hale, the cowardy cat. Her mind went back to that day of the street fight. She smiled. At that moment Clarence Hale, who had been screwing about most shockingly, as though searching for someone, turned and met her smile, intended for no one, with a startlingly radiant one of his own, intended most plainly for her. He half started forward in his pew, and then remembered, and sat back again, but with an effect of impermanence that was ludicrous. It had been years since he had left Winnebago. At the time of his mother's death they had tried to reach him, and had been unable to get in touch with him for weeks. He had been off on some mountain expedition, hundreds of miles from railroad or telegraph. Fanny remembered having read about him in the Winnebago Courier. He seemed to be climbing mountains a great deal, rather difficult mountains, evidently, from the fuss they made over it. A queer enough occupation for a cowardy cat. There had been a book, too, about the Rockies. She had not read it. She rather disliked these nature books, as do most nature lovers. She told herself that when she came upon a flaming golden maple in October, she was content to know it was a maple, and to warm her soul at its blaze. There had been something in the Chicago Herald, though, oh yes, it had spoken of him as the brilliant young naturalist, Clarence Hale. He was to have gone on an expedition with Roosevelt. A sprained ankle or some such thing had prevented. Fanny smiled again to herself. His mother, the fussy person who had been responsible for his boyhood reefers and 2 shiny shoes, and his cowardice too, no doubt, had dreamed of seeing her Clarence a rabbi. From that point Fanny's thoughts wandered to the brave old man in the pulpit. She had heard almost nothing of the service. She looked at him now, at him, and then at his congregation, inattentive and palpably bored. As always with her, the thing stamped itself on her mind as a picture. She was forever seeing a situation in terms of its human value. How small he looked, how frail, against the background of the massive ark with its red velvet curtain. And how bravely he glared over his blue glasses at the 2 Aaron's girls who were whispering and giggling together, eyes on the newcomer. So this was what life did to you, was it? Squeezed you dry, and then cast you aside in your old age, a pulp, a bit of discard? Well, they'd never catch her that way. Unchurchly thoughts, these. The place was very peaceful and quiet, lulling one like a narcotic. The rabbi's voice had in it that soothing monotony bred of years in the pulpit. Fanny found her thoughts straying back to the busy, bright little store on Elm Street, then forward to the Haynes Cooper plant and the fight that was before her. There settled about her mouth a certain grim line that sat strangely on so young a face. The service marched on. There came the organ prelude that announced the mourner's prayer. Then Rabbi Thalmann began to intone the Kaddish. Fanny rose, prayer book in hand. At that Clarence Hale rose too, hurriedly, as one unaccustomed to the service, and stood with unbowed head, looking at the rabbi interestedly, thoughtfully, reverently. The 2 stood alone. Death had been kind to Congregation Emmanuel this year. The prayer ended. Fanny winked the tears from her eyes almost wrathfully. She sat down, and there swept over her a feeling of finality. It was like the closing of Book 1 in a volume made up of 3 parts. She said to herself, Winnebago is ended, and my life here. How interesting that I should know that and feel it. It is like the first movement in one of the concertos Theodore was forever playing. Now for the second movement. It's got to be lively, fortissimo, presto. For so clever a girl as Fanny Brandeis, that was a stupid conclusion at which to arrive. How could she think it possible to shed her past life like a garment? Those impressionable years, between 14 and 24, could never be cast off. She might don a new cloak to cover the old dress beneath, but the old would always be there, its folds peeping out here and there, its outlines plainly to be seen. She might eat of things rare and drink of things costly, but the sturdy, stocky little girl in the made-over silk dress, who had resisted the devil in Weinberg's pantry on that long-ago Day of Atonement, would always be there at the feast. Myself, I confess, I am tired of these stories of young women who go to the big city, there to do battle with failure, to grapple with temptation, sin, and discouragement. So it may as well be admitted that Fanny Brandeis's story was not that of a painful, hand-over-hand climb. She was made for success. What she attempted, she accomplished. That which she strove for, she won. She was too sure, too vital, too electric for failure. No, Fanny Brandeis's struggle went on inside, and in trying to stifle it she came near making the blackest failure that a woman can make. In grubbing for the pot of gold, she almost missed the rainbow. Rabbi Thalmann raised his arms for the benediction. Fanny looked straight up at him as though stamping a picture on her mind. His eyes were resting gently on her, or perhaps she just fancied that he spoke to her alone as he began the words of the ancient closing prayer. May the blessings of the Lord our God rest upon you. God bless thee and keep thee. May he cause his countenance to shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. May God lift up his countenance unto thee. At the last word she hurried up the aisle and down the stairs into the soft beauty of the May night. She felt she could stand no good-byes. In her hotel room she busied herself with the half-packed trunks and bags. So it was, she altogether failed to see the dark young man who hurried after her eagerly, but who was stopped by a dozen welcoming hands there in the temple vestibule. He swore an inward "Damn!" as he saw her straight, slim figure disappear down the steps and around the corner, even while he found himself saying politely, "Why, thanks, it's good to be back," and, "Yes, things have changed, all but the temple and Rabbi Thalmann." Fanny left Winnebago at 8 next morning. End of chapter 8.